Hey guys, and welcome back to Simply Dark Season 2, Episode 3. Keeping up with the theme of last week's video, today I bring you another true crime case that will for sure bring you chills down your spine. I first heard about Sylvia Likens' murder case on the amazing podcast Crime Junkie, which I would super recommend to you guys if you are into true crime. It's an amazing podcast, and I immediately started doing my own research because I thought this was a very interesting case to cover here on my Simply Dark series. Sylvia was born on January 3rd, 1949, and sadly she ended up having a very short life. She was known to be very sweet and very kind to everyone around her, and she was in fact the middle child between two sets of twins. Sylvia's parents worked at the carnival circus, and for that reason they traveled a lot, making it very hard for Sylvia to build friendships throughout her life. Her parents had a very difficult marriage as they kept arguing over and over again for multiple different reasons, but always tried their best to stay together. Unfortunately, in 1964, they decided that enough was enough and filed for a divorce. After the split, Sylvia and Jenny, her younger sister, stayed with their mom, and the rest of the siblings moved away with their dad. And after living apart for a while, Sylvia's parents decided that although they were separated, they should still keep working at the carnival circus, and came to the conclusion that it would be better for everyone if the kids didn't came with them this time. So Sylvia and her sister Jenny stayed with a woman called Gertrude something. I will not even try to pronounce her surname because it's too hard, but I will leave it here so you guys know. This woman was introduced to the Likens by a mutual friend, and because she was a stay-at-home mom with 7 kids, she looked like the perfect person to take care of their daughters for a little while, because they intended to come back after 2 months. So the girls would only stay with Gertrude just for 2 months. The rest of Sylvia's siblings stayed with their grandparents. Now, Gertrude was divorced and lived in a rented house with 7 children. And obviously she saw no problem in taking care of 2 girls more, as long as she was paid $20 a week. So the parents thought the payment was fair and decided to leave the girls there. What they didn't know was that Gertrude had loads of health problems. She had a big depression, she had asthma, she was addicted to smoking and drinking, and she even did drugs. And it wasn't long before she began to vent all her frustrations on the girls. It all began when one of the weeks the $20 payment arrived late. That was the first time that Gertrude physically abused the girls. She was very mad that the payment didn't arrive. She thought that the parents left the girls dead and wouldn't come back to get them, so she was very upset and she hit the girls. She took them to the basement and hit them for the first time. Now, during all this commotion, Paula, one of Gertrude's daughters, found out that she was pregnant. And she told Sylvia what was going on and that she was very worried because the guy was married, and asked Sylvia not to tell anyone. Unfortunately, when Paula was having a fight with the baby daddy, in the middle of the fight, he's starting to getting abusive towards Paula, so Sylvia decided to tell him, please stop, because she's pregnant. From that day onwards, Paula hated Sylvia. She thought she had no reason to tell her secret. She shouldn't have done it. Basically, she was really mad at her for telling the guy in these circumstances that she was pregnant, and from then on she thought that everything going wrong in her life was because of Sylvia. And Paula started getting Gertrude against Sylvia, and that's when things got really bad. Sylvia would frequently be falsely accused of misbehaving, and she would be punished severely. One time, Gertrude even accused Sylvia of stealing, and to punish her, she decided to burn her fingers with a light match. And when Gertrude was too weak to punish her, because she had all these health issues, Paula would do it instead. It also didn't take long for Paula to start creating all these rumors at school and putting all the neighborhood kids against Sylvia. And these neighborhood kids actually took turns into torturing Sylvia. They would kick her, beat her, and they would even put their cigarettes out in her skin, because this was something that Gertrude used to do to her when she misbehaved, and the kids started noticing the marks on her skin and they started doing the same. Now, when the rumors about Paula's pregnancy started circulating the school, Paula got really mad because she thought that Sylvia told everyone. So she got home, told her mom, and her mom was really mad. At this point, her mom didn't know that she was pregnant, and she thought that this was all a lie created by Sylvia. So what she did next was horrendous. She called all the kids to the living room for a family meeting, and she actually forced Sylvia to undress in front of everyone and told her to insert a bottle of Coke into her vagina. And this was to prove that she wasn't a virgin anymore and that she was lying to everyone. As if that wasn't enough, later that night, Sylvia was forced to take a bath in scalding hot water. And they did this so she could be cleansed of her sins. Now, that night, Sylvia was so scared, she was so in shock, she was so horrified that she couldn't sleep properly. She had nightmares all night and she ended up wetting her bed. Needless to say, the next morning she was severely punished for wetting her bed. Gertrude decided that Sylvia was not fit to sleep with her children anymore, so she pulled Sylvia out of school, threw her down the cellar stairs and locked her in. From that day forward, she would only eat crackers and water. She would not be allowed to get off the cellar. She would have to do her physiological necessities in there. So she would eat, sleep, and do everything in the same place. Now, during Sylvia's imprisonment, she would get beat up all the time. Gertrude would beat her up all the time. She would give her cold baths and do all these crazy things to her. Paula would come once in a while as well and do that to her. And John, Paula's little brother, would even invite the neighborhood kids to come look at Paula and do whatever they wanted to her. Again, they would kick her, beat her, they would laugh at her, they would play with her like she was a doll. Like, how crazy is that? Like, if someone came to you and say, "Oh, I have a girl in my basement, come on and play with her," I would probably call the police straight away. Like, what the heck, who does this? But they did that and they thought it was really funny, and they would go there over and over and over. So they would go there almost every day to see Sylvia. And as if this wasn't enough, one day Gertrude thought that she would announce to everyone that Sylvia was a prostitute and that she liked it and that she deserved to be punished for that. So she took a large needle and carved in her stomach, "I'm a prostitute and I'm proud of it." And bear in mind that all her kids and some neighborhood kids were watching this and did nothing to help. And obviously, because Sylvia was fighting a lot to her not to do this, Gertrude kinda lost her breath and couldn't keep up writing what she was writing with a needle. So she asked this neighbor boy called Richard Hoobs to finish the job. And instead of saying no like a normal person and going to the police, he decided to finish the job, so he did it.
All I did was write out that thing on her stomach, then I hit her about 10 or 15 times.
But how come?
Well, mostly because Gertie told me to.
Now this went on for a while, and obviously Sylvia's condition was deteriorating. She was barely eating, she was barely drinking, so obviously her health wasn't in good state. And when things got to the point of no return and Gertrude realized that Sylvia was actually dying, she came up with this plan to get rid of her. So basically she told Sylvia to write a note saying that a bunch of guys found her and raped her and beat her up and left her in the woods. Gertrude's plan was to blindfold Sylvia, take her to the woods and leave her there with the note. Now somehow Sylvia was able to hear the whole plan, and although she was very weak, she tried to escape during the night. But unfortunately she got caught by Gertrude and she brought her back to the basement and again punished her severely. Sylvia died 2 days later on October 26, 1965. Cause of death being swelling of the brain, internal bleeding of the brain, and shock induced by Sylvia's extensive skin damage. And obviously on top of this, her extreme malnutrition.
Well, I'll come in about, she come up from the basement, and we noticed she was cold and everything, so we carried her upstairs, give her a warm bath and artificial respiration. When she stopped breathing, we gave her a warm bath, and then she stopped breathing. And so I gave her artificial respiration for about 10 minutes, and then I went and called the police.
By the time police found the girl, she had been dead some 8 to 12 hours.
So by this point, Gertrude was still in denial. She thought Sylvia was pretending, so she basically did nothing. And what happened was one of her children decided to call the police and tell them to come. That's when police arrive and see this whole situation happening. Now at this point, Jenny, Sylvia's sister, and you guys might thinking, where was Jenny all this time? So she was there. She was witnessing all this, but she was too scared to say anything because Gertrude would always tell her that if she told anyone what was going on with her sister, she would have the same treatment. So by this point, Jenny got all her strength together, went to talk with the police officer and told him, if you get me out of here, I will tell you everything. And just like that, police were now aware of the story of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens. Now, during her trial, Gertrude denied all of this. She said she had nothing to do with what happened. She actually claimed that her children done everything by themselves and that she didn't have knowledge of what was going on.
I did never beat that girl. Never. She was beat up on by other girls. In fact, my own daughter stopped her in the jaw and broke her wrist. And so, I mean, there you go. And girls around the neighborhood beat her up, bloodied her nose. One girl broke her nose, in fact, I think.
But on May 19, 1966, the jury thought differently and found Gertrude guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Paula was also sentenced in a different trial, and she was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison as well. Richard Hobbs, John, Gertrude's youngest son, and another neighborhood boy that helped all this situation called Coy Hubert. They were all convicted of manslaughter, were all sentenced to 21-year term at the Indiana State Reformatory. Now, what happened next? In 1971, the Indiana Supreme Court granted Gertrude and Paula a new trial, but Gertrude was again convicted of first-degree murder on August 5, 1971. Paula pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and served about 2 years in prison. 2 years! Can you believe this? I'm so mad. When I read this, I felt so betrayed. Like, how can a person that does something like this, because if her mother was guilty, she was as guilty as her mom, because everything started because of her in the first place. Now, something similar happened to the boys too. So these 3 boys we talked about before, they were out on parole in 1968. So they only served 2 years in prison because, and wait for it, they had good behavior. Now, in September 1985, Gertrude was also released on parole, moved to a different place under a different name, and lived in obscurity till June 16, 1990, when she fell ill with lung cancer and ended up dying from that. You know, if justice is not made, karma will caught up with you. Now, Paula ended up getting married and living a pretty normal life in a farm somewhere far away. I think she even got a job as a teacher, like taking care of children with special needs. I'm not too sure about this or if it's just a rumor, but eventually people knew about her past at the school and they just ended up firing her. John, Gertrude's little son, ended up growing up, having a pretty normal life as well. And he ended up being a lay minister in Texas, and he counseled children of divorced parents. So for me, this is the biggest life turn around thing I have ever seen in my life. Like, from a crazy kid to someone actually good helping people. I'm not completely sure what I feel about it. I mean, we all deserve a second chance, I guess, and if he really changed, I think we should applaud him because he turned his life around and he's doing something good for other people. But at the same time, like, there's always that little bit of a doubt, like, can we trust him? Richard Hobbs, the guy that helped carve these nasty words in their stomach, actually also died from cancer. So again, I think karma had a big role here. Coy Hubert was out of the reformatory as well, and he kinda went downhill. Like, he had a life of crime. He ended up going to jail and coming out, going to jail and coming out. So he lived his life like this, not good life at all. And finally, Jenny, Sylvia's sister, she ended up having a pretty normal life. From what I could read, she had a happy life, and she ended up dying in 2004 at the age of 54. Now, this story inspired multiple books, documentaries, movies throughout all these years. But the one that I really would like to recommend to you guys if you are interested in this murder case is the 2007 movie An American Crime. I feel that it is an excellent movie. I think that it portrays this whole story very well. It gives you a very realistic look of what happened, but I do have to say that this is not a movie for sensitive people because it is quite graphic and it is quite upsetting. But if, like me, you guys are crime junkies, I would definitely recommend this movie for you. I will leave all the links and sources about everything we just talked about in the description box below, so make sure you go there and check it out. That's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe and join the family, and I will see you in my next episode.